Good afternoon and welcome to this edition of Credit Matters TV. My name is Christian Woody. I head the Corporate and Infrastructure Ratings Group for Standard & Poor's here in Europe, the Middle East and Africa. Here this afternoon I'm with Tanya Seneva and Mark Davison. Welcome.
Thank you.
Tanya is an Associate Director in our Utilities team and Mark is a Director in the same team. We're here today to talk about RIIO. Now, RIIO is a fundamental change, I think, to the electricity and gas industries here in the UK. So let me start by asking Tanya, what is RIIO and why is it needed?
Well, Chris, RIIO is the new regulatory framework which the UK regulator for the electricity and gas markets Ofgem is proposing. It stands for revenues equals innovation plus incentives plus outputs. And we do think it's one of the most fundamental reforms in the sector, since the sector was first privatized almost 20 years ago. It's a very good question, why the need to change the framework. The regulator aims to deliver 32 billion out of the 200 billion of investments in the energy sector, which the UK government needs so that it meets the very challenging carbon reduction targets, while at the same time ensuring security of supply. Inevitably, we think that customer bills are going to rise, but with this change of the regulatory framework, the bills will not rise as fast and as much as they otherwise would under the existing framework.
Okay, so thinking about ratings for 1 minute, Mark, how many ratings are likely to be affected by this, and what's the outlook on those ratings?
Yes, well, Chris, we actually rate a total of 22 network operators that are covered by RIIO, and this includes the transmission owners and also the gas distribution network companies that will be regulated under RIIO from 2013, plus also the electricity distribution companies that will be regulated at a slightly later stage from 2015. These 22 companies are actually owned by a total of 10 separate corporate groups that we also rate, which is actually quite a fair number in our view. The ratings distribution is actually entirely in the triple B and single A rating categories, which is not really surprising given that these are natural monopolies whose earnings and revenues are almost entirely regulated through the framework. In terms of the outlooks, we see stable outlooks for every company, with the exception of just two. These are the networks owned by Scottish Power, which is ultimately owned by the Spanish utility Iberdrola, and we equalize ratings on the two, so they have a negative outlook. So at least at the moment, we have a broadly stable outlook for the sector.
Okay. Now, Tanya, which changes under RIIO then are most relevant, most critical from a credit perspective? What should investors be looking for particularly here?
Well, RIIO contains a number of changes, and we've shortlisted just 3 which we think are the most important from a credit perspective. The first one is the extension of the regulatory period. So from previously 5 years, now we go into an 8 years period, which the regulator has put in place so that they can free management time to do what they can do best, I mean operate the grids as efficiently as possible. We do believe that this is going to increase the predictability and stability of cash flows and earnings for the rated utilities. However, whether we see it as a credit positive or credit negative, we can't really say at this point. We do believe it depends on the flexibility which the framework will allow for the companies to meet any uncertain costs should such arise within a regulatory period. I think we note as reassuring that the regulator kept in place some of those reopening mechanisms which are now available under the existing framework. Moving on to the second important change is the greater emphasis on incentives. We think this is greater rewards and penalties for the companies, and we see as the implication that the companies will see a greater differentiation in the financial performance between the strong and the weak operators. And the third change is perhaps the most technical in nature. It intends to align the economic and the accounting realities for the regulated utilities by changing the lives for depreciation of the new electricity assets, which is no longer from 20 to 45 years, as well as to for the gas distribution companies to fully capitalize replacement expenditure. What we believe the consequence is going to be negative on the credit metrics. We think that cash flow will be constrained in the early years of the period, and we do believe that returns will be pushed back towards the later years of the period, or perhaps beyond what is normal as a rating horizon. We do take comfort from what the regulator, however, has said on a number of occasions, that they will keep transitioning arrangements in place should the credit metrics fall below what we consider commensurate with a solid investment grade.
Okay. Mark, probably just to start to draw this together, will it be financial risk or business risk that's most impacted by RIIO, and will ratings change as a result of this, do you think?
Yeah. Well, I think there are possible implications for both financial and business risk, and I'll go into that in a moment. But without overall, to answer your question, without meaning to sort of sit on the fence, as it were, I do think it is somewhat too early to answer the question directly. I mean, as Tanya has noted, we see a number of potential sources of increased risk as a result of the RIIO framework, but equally we've noted that the regulator has offered a range of mitigating factors and mechanisms that could offset those risks. And I think that our views will develop quite strongly as we meet with the management teams of each company during our sort of ongoing surveillance of those companies over the next 12 months. In these meetings, we will for the first time see the final business plan that each company is presenting to the regulator for the 8-year period, certainly starting 2013 to 2020. And these business plans are important because they will give us first sight, if you like, of how the ratios might actually look under the new framework, and that will inform our view of financial risk regarding RIIO. Business risk has also some potential for effects. For example, the main component of business risk in such a sector is the regulatory framework and the strength and effectiveness and credit supportiveness of regulation. And so that is potentially susceptible to some change under the new framework as well. Tanya cited just one example of the extending the life of the period, of the regulatory period, from 5 to 8 years, and the need to maintain flexibility through reopening mechanisms that are sufficient in our view. And if there isn't sufficient reopening mechanisms in our view, then that could be an increase in business risk. So that could affect business risk too. I think we'd note that certainly, first of all, if there is any impact at all on ratings or outlooks, we will certainly communicate that to the market as soon as possible as we develop our view over the next 12 months. I would say that there are certain key parameters that actually will dictate our final assessment that will not be known until the regulator publishes the final proposals, that it calls it, in December 2012. And it is only then that we'll have confirmation on certain key figures such as the cost of capital, the amount of allowances provided to each company for operating and capital expenditures. So in terms of our final assessment of business risk, I would like to point out overall, to conclude, that we actually do have a number of published ratio thresholds for a given rating for individual issuers. And I would like to point out, I think we would like to point out, that those ratios will only stay valid if our business risk view under the RIIO framework is unchanged. So, for example, if we do see an increase in our view of business risk resulting from the RIIO framework, then we would likely require a commensurate strengthening in the financial ratios that would require in order for those ratings on those companies to be unchanged.
Okay. Look, thank you both very much, Tanya, Mark, for that very full explanation of the impact of RIIO as you currently understand it on the companies in the gas and electricity sectors that you're currently rating. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.